Lights X, tonight at 8:30 on 3TV, Arizona's Family, the place with more news.
What happened March 13th, 1997?
Oh, what do we got?
Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people tell the same story. Unknown objects, unheard witnesses, unanswered questions, unseen video. Until now. This is the Phoenix Lights X. Good evening and welcome to our special presentation, the Phoenix Lights X. I'm Beverly Kidd. 10 years ago, what some would call the most significant UFO sighting in North America happened right here in Phoenix. And whether you know all about this or know nothing at all, we hope tonight you'll watch our show and learn something new, something to make you think, to question, and maybe you'll find an answer. But let's begin with what we know for sure. Let's begin with the story back then.
There's one behind the chimney. One just flared up.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
There were 4 videos that night, which all came to define the Phoenix Lights. One taken far out in the East Valley, one from Ahwatukee, and 2 from North Phoenix.
Oh, what do we got?
The tapes show the same pattern, a string of lights in the sky, seemingly lined up in a curve, boomerang, or V-shape, and all around 10 p.m.
10 o'clock, March 13th, Thursday night.
It was not just in Phoenix.
George Parks heads up Arizona's branch of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. He says the first accounts came in more than 2 hours earlier, up north from Paulden. More people called in, and those initial witnesses describe more than a simple string of lights.
It was in this V pattern of the 5 lights, with the one light in the front and on the side, like a perfect V, coming at us.
Tim Lee and his family were outside, looked up, and stopped cold.
Perfectly symmetrical. It blended into the sky extremely well.
This is Lee's computer rendering of what he saw. Others agree.
There were about 15 of us outside on the patio waiting for our hostess to get the dinner ready for us.
Terry Mansfield was meeting with hospice volunteers in Phoenix. They all saw it, big and black.
The whole sky was blacked out. Where there had been bright stars everywhere, all of a sudden all you could see was black. And because we couldn't see, I couldn't see the front or the back or the sides because it was so big, I had no idea how big it was. And my first impression was, it's so silent. There's absolutely no noise.
Witness reports progressed from Paulden, south over Phoenix, Tempe, Casa Grande, all the way to Tucson.
The Phoenix Lights.
Where George Parks holds monthly meetings and still hears about it 10 years later.
But he said, my God, George, that was the biggest thing that I have ever seen. Triangle shape, he says, no lights, but it blocked out every star as it was going over me. And he says, and I kept watching it.
He says the object turned and flew north over Interstate 10 to Phoenix and disappeared. These tapes are the only evidence from the events of March 13th, and they only show lights in the sky. If there was a big black craft, don't you think someone would have videotaped it? Such videotapes are rumored to exist, but only one has surfaced, the one I'm holding right here. But we'll get to that a little bit later. I'm in the control tower at Sky Harbor Airport. It's empty now, abandoned for a newer facility. But it was a hub of activity just recently, a place where they monitor and track everything in the sky.
Text 209 was left 1500.
Every day, thousands of lives depend on the people in this room, the control tower at Sky Harbor Airport.
Always somebody coming and going. Right now, we're about the 7th busiest airport in the country.
Tower manager Greg Smith watches over a crew that deals with billions of bytes of data.
This is a screen that shows the whole continental U.S. Each of those white dots denotes an airplane in the air traffic control system.
And among all this high-tech equipment, there are also binoculars.
That we see in the sky from the ground can be very misleading. You'd be amazed at the number of calls I get down in my office from people that I would consider very lucid, very rational folks, but they're convinced they saw 2 airplanes almost hit.
Seaway Echo, contact ground on 132.55.
Controllers are trained to read the screens and the skies. But with all the planes, helicopters, even blimps and balloons that traverse the valley's airways, sometimes some objects look just plain weird.
That happens up here a lot, you know. What the heck did you just do? But no. Occasionally we'll see stuff that looks odd. We'll also see stuff that looks incredibly beautiful.
So, the Phoenix Lights?
Well, my take on that is just because of a number of factors. As you can see out looking to the west today, there's a significant amount of haze and smoke in the air. If the winds are just right, you see contrails that appear to be merging.
And at night, far-off lights can be even tougher to identify.
Where the military does a lot of stuff at night, I know not what goes on down there. I'm not sure I want to know all the time. But on a clear night here in Phoenix, particularly if you're from an elevated location, you can see a long way. And that may be what that kind of stuff is. I don't know.
User 1161, join Bravo, contact ground north.
Here in the tower, it's all business. They're more concerned with moving people safely than with strange sights in the sky. And that's the way it should be. But still.
We too have more questions than answers sometimes.
So, if there are unknown craft flying our skies, the most likely folks who would know about it would be the military. The question is, would they tell us? Arizona is considered a prime training ground for pilots in the armed forces, with facilities for Army, Air Force, National Guard, Marines, even the Navy. Some 40,000 servicemen and women are stationed in the state. The military has plenty of classified, top secret, and eyes-only projects. But when it came to the Phoenix Lights...
All right, you tell me what it is.
The military had no answer, at least for a while. It took 3 months before the National Guard took responsibility. Then Captain Eileen Benz.
What it basically came down to was asking Davis Moffin's public affairs officer, look, I know your last plane down was down no later than 6 p.m., but maybe was there anybody visiting? Was there another unit there, TDY, temporary duty, maybe another state, something? And his answer was, oh yeah, Snowbird.
Operation Snowbird, a flare exercise by visiting pilots. But what about the reports of that big black craft? By all outward appearances, the government doesn't even care. Officially, the military has not investigated UFO reports since 1969 and cannot substantiate that they exist. So whenever there's a call about strange craft or lights like this, officials at Luke Air Force Base tell us, quote, we respond by checking our flying schedule to see what, if any, aircraft from Luke are flying in the area of the sighting. If indeed F-16s from Luke are in the area, we explain that F-16s are in the area. If Luke F-16s are not flying, we explain to the caller that no Luke F-16s are flying and that they may want to call the FAA since they are the agency that tracks all aircraft.
Silo 1 departure, Flagstaff transition.
And as we already know, the FAA's people in the control towers are more worried about things they can identify than things they can't. So what about the flare theory? Still ahead on the Phoenix Lights X, we're there on a military flare drop. See them up close and compare for yourself. We'll hear from an aircraft captain. What did this pilot see? And from a state legislator who's never done an interview before.
I thought, that is a very unusual deal. That's weird.
They're talking exclusively with us and never before seen video. A triangle of lights moving through the stars. The Phoenix Lights X will return. February 6th, 2007. This string of lights appears in the night sky. Hundreds see it. Many believe it's the same thing they saw 10 years earlier. The military answer: pilots releasing flares from their jets. It's an explanation we've heard before. So what are flares? What are they used for? And more importantly, what do they look like? This is what flares look like by day, a metal cylinder with wires and gauges. Here at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, loading them for practice runs is almost a daily duty.
This is where all the pyrotechnics are actually located. This top section here is where the parachute is actually located.
Staff Sergeant Tim Ventrello gave us an exclusive look at the most commonly used flare in the world, the Lu-2.
The burn time on these is going to be right about 5 minutes, and they drop at about 8 feet per second. So at 1,000 feet, they're going to light up an area of about 500 meters in diameter, so it's a rather large area.
Want to see? Now we're south of Gila Bend on the Barry M. Goldwater Range at night. High above us, A-10 aircraft begin their training missions.
We like to fly at night because if the enemy can't see you to shoot you, that's some sense of security.
Major Dave Truxa, aka Steamer, a pilot.
Flares were invented to aid in the target acquisition process. So you put out a flare, like kind of an artificial moon, near the target area. Now you can see it. Now you can go down, drop your bomb, and then come back off. And then once the flare extinguishes, now you're covered in the darkness of night again.
In February 2007, hundreds of people saw these lights in the western sky and immediately thought of the Phoenix lights of 1997.
This isn't first for me.
Were they back? Was it flare activity? Within 2 hours, the FAA had an answer.
There were about a half dozen F-16s out of Luke Air Force Base operating at the range. They were practicing ground attacks, and that involved the discharge of flares.
Plenty of people are skeptical. We took the video to a professional. Jim Dilatoso has spent almost 30 years examining strange objects in the skies. And after running a high-tech analysis on the February video, he concludes these lights are flares.
At the end of the day, I think we're going to find out that it's flares.
While they look stationary to the naked eye, speeding up the video reveals they drift ever so slightly.
Just somebody out in their yard looking up at the sky would be able to see it from a great distance. And because of the slow rate of fall, sometimes from a good distance, they almost look like they're just stagnant in the air. Just a nice, bright, shining light that's just slowly going down.
That answers one mystery, but leaves another still hanging over our heads. Still ahead, another piece of the puzzle falls into place. A video never been seen before and never explained. Plus an aircraft pilot and a state legislator who risked their reputations to speak up.
It doesn't matter to me what people think. I know what I saw, and I know what it wasn't.
Their stories when the Phoenix Lights X continues.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
They're called the Phoenix Lights. The government said video like this only shows a military operation. National Guard pilots training with flares. Plenty of people reject that explanation. And now, 10 years after the fact, the incident's primary investigator explains how and why his analysis shows that this is something else.
I had already been analyzing UFO photographs for over 15 years.
His name and face may be familiar. In 1997, Jim Dilatoso's company, Village Labs, suddenly got worldwide exposure.
There is that incident this year on the 13th of March.
One thing not in question.
Reporters from all over came to his Tempe office, looking for answers to the questions raised on March 13th.
You have to objectively take the data out, get the numbers, compare the numbers to a database of knowns, and if you don't get a match, it's called an unknown. It's not called an alien spacecraft. When you don't get a match, it's called an unknown.
Dilatoso fielded criticism from many who said it wasn't possible to retrieve data from home video the way he claimed, looking at color, brightness, and more in-depth details in a process called spectrum analysis. He says at the time, Village Labs was testing software unavailable to the public or to government agencies.
Well, there's a problem because that software was confidential, we were on contract, and I shouldn't have been using it. If the Phoenix Lights event happened today, some changes in the way it was analyzed would be readily available to us.
Now, spectrum analysis is fairly routine. Home video has gone digital, with better resolution and sharpness. Dilatoso still has critics who believe these 1997 videos are nothing more than military flares at 10 o'clock that evening.
I don't believe that they're flares. But that's one little piece of time in a 3-hour-long event. What about everything else that went on that night? If this is flares that can fly in formation over the entire state, silently and stay in formation, I want to go to work for the company that makes those.
All right, and if you missed tonight's special presentation, the Phoenix Lights X, you're going to have another chance to see it. An encore showing, Sunday, 6:30. And in the meantime, all of our Phoenix Lights coverage and more available, of course, on azfamily.com. A lot of folks interested in this.
All right, news of the unexplained now. A lot of people will not talk about UFOs because of the obvious ridicule factor. And despite hundreds of witnesses to the Phoenix Lights in 1997, even the highest official in the state poked fun. Gary Harper has this story.
Don't get him too close to me, please. It's, you know.
It was June 1997, just 3 months after this sighting captured the state's attention, and the state's top elected official, Governor J. Fife Symington, issued a news release advising that Arizona investigators had discovered the being responsible for the lights.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
A governor aide dressed in a silver jumpsuit, alien mask, and gloves. That moment was infuriating for Frances Barwood.
Over the next several months, I returned over 700 phone calls, myself personally. What was amazing to me is they all described the same object. And you can't get 700 people to agree on one thing. So it was, you know, I started thinking, you know, what the heck is going on here?
Barwood was a Phoenix City Councilwoman at the time and tried to get an official investigation.
And I wanted to know what it was, and I wanted to know why, and I wanted to know, you know, whatever could be found out. And the amazing thing to me was I was the only one.
Newspapers were harsh. The governor made a mockery of it. Classic disinformation, says Steve Bassett.
Essentially, they did what governments have often done. If you've got to isolate something, or a people, a group, in order to minimize them, diminish them, you create a ghetto.
Bassett is a Washington, D.C. lobbyist. His issue? Getting the U.S. government to disclose all of its files on UFOs. Data, he says, has been covered up since Roswell 60 years ago.
And using very simple but very effective techniques, by leaking stories to the tabloids, by putting out disinformation, and other silliness that would just give it enough of a taint of ridicule that would keep scientists, media, philanthropists, universities away from it.
In 2005, pilots for the Mexican Air Force counted 11 strange balls of light following their planes. Mexico's military released this infrared cockpit video to journalists in hopes someone might find an answer. The sighting is still a mystery. Bassett says it's time for our own government to be as forthcoming about unidentified flying objects, like the Phoenix Lights of 1997.
You cannot deny the presence of extraterrestrials and in any way maintain an integrity as a truth-telling nation. And so that issue alone justifies disclosure tomorrow.
And from her new home in Prescott Valley, Barwood also asks for an end to the secrecy and the ridicule.
When the truth comes out, if there are visitors from elsewhere, if it is our military having games, whatever it is, I want to know the truth. Doesn't everybody? And if they don't, why?
All great questions. We are just 7 minutes away from tonight's special presentation, the Phoenix Lights X, with new witnesses and a long-lost videotape from March 13th, 1997. Tonight's the big anniversary. Cannot wait to watch. Beverly hosts right here at 8:30 tonight. Certainly some very intriguing stuff.
You've seen the home videos from the Phoenix Lights. You've seen the home videos from the Phoenix Lights, and now we take a look at why some witnesses wish those clips had never been seen.
Just dumb luck. I was in the right place at the right time.
Mike Fortson doesn't consider himself special, but he and his wife were among the hundreds, perhaps thousands of people back in 1997 to see the Phoenix Lights. Only he says what they saw did not look like this.
I had ringside seats. We were in the perfect angle. And I saw 3 white, bright, huge lights in triangle formation angled down. And at that point in time, I thought I was going to see a plane crash.
The Fortsons say the lights they saw were not on an airplane. He's ex-military and knows what aircraft look like and sound like at night.
Come on in my office. We got to see it for about 2 minutes. It was very low to the ground. Planes that were coming in to land at Sky Harbor were going above it.
A computer graphic whiz came up with this animation, which he says is almost exactly right.
This black object, which was a little bit more than just a black line coming across through the gray background and stuck out like a sore thumb, was coming right at us. It was boomerang shaped, I would say, like a boomerang, and it was coming right at us. We stood there paralyzed watching this.
A big black craft flying over Phoenix, and he says it was 8:30 at night. Now, all the home video we've seen from March of 1997 was taken an hour and a half later. Most people accept that the military was releasing flares that night. Fortson and others are convinced that's all these videos show, and he'd like to see them erased.
What happened in the 8 o'clock hour is what people really need to understand.
The Fortsons lived in Chandler back then. Now, 10 years later, Mike still scans the skies from his new home in Prescott Valley, hoping to see it again.
We're in awe. You're not supposed to see this. This is not real. We've been told all of our lives this doesn't exist. This thing is this big. I mean, it is coming right at you. You're sitting there, you're frozen.
Well, do you want to see more? Don't miss tonight's special, The Phoenix Lights X. Beverly Kidd hosts with new witnesses, new information, and new video that you haven't seen before. It all starts tonight at 6:30 right here on 3TV.
Years ago, the Phoenix Lights captured world attention, of course, and opinions are still varied. Just put that down right there. Are still varied on what exactly they were, but a number of people believe that the objects seen in the sky that night have been with us for centuries. Beverly shows us records that some of Arizona's earliest residents left behind.
These UFOs are out here, man, and I want to find them.
Perhaps no one spends as much time on skyward mysteries as Jeff Woolwine.
But when these lights come on, it's like somebody with a switch on a wall. Boop! Here we are.
The Phoenix man has hours and hours of videotaped airborne objects. He's convinced they're connected in some way to South Mountain.
South Mountain has been a chalkboard of UFO sightings and reports for thousands of years. When you look at these petroglyphs, you have to look at the whole landscape.
Woolwine takes people on tours of the petroglyphs here, pointing out rock etchings that he says look like things he's videotaped in the sky. And Jeremy Fox believes
there's definitely certain shapes on these rocks that look similar to UFOs. I think we're in a very important spot in the UFO world.
Jeff Woolwine, the first person to do this. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Woolwine's passion gets him noticed. He's been interviewed dozens of times. The Cutting Edge TV show tapes in Tucson and airs in 10 cities around the country. Host Jim Rogers says,
I think he's as honest as the day is long.
He describes his guest as top-notch, credible, and says Woolwine is one of the good guys.
He's giving DVDs away to people to open their hearts and minds to this stuff. His heart is in this. He's not in this for profit.
Woolwine's tours are free too, and you're free to believe or not.
Whether you believe in UFOs or not, there is something here. And they were here a long time ago. And their sightings is recorded on the mountain.
All right, so don't forget about tonight's special presentation, The Phoenix Lights X with an all-new videotape from March 13th, 1997. Beverly Kidd hosts at 8:30 tonight. It is must-see TV right here on 3. The 10th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights, and for many people, you know, even if they didn't see the lights, the event changed their lives forever. Tonight, Beverly Kidd introduces us to some Arizona folks who now keep their video cameras turned to the skies.
And you can definitely see it. It has a humanoid shape to it.
It's not the Phoenix Lights, but just as perplexing. Rich Giordano is one of a new breed of sky watchers, inspired by what happened in 1997. Now he has his own mystery videos taken in the Phoenix skies.
Yeah, it looks like a human. Could be a human alien.
A worldwide phenomenon called a flying humanoid. No one knows what it is.
What in the world is that?
In Tucson, Joaquin Ellis is getting into UFOs too, after capturing this strange thing in 2006.
Above the roof, so I estimated it couldn't have been more than 100 feet off the ground, okay?
He goes to UFO conferences, volunteering in hopes of finding someone who can make sense of an afternoon sighting.
Whoa, I'm getting a series of lights right there. I got it.
Then there's Jeff Willis.
I started videotaping UFOs in 1995 out here, but I've always had an interest in it.
His website, ufosoverphoenix.com, features homemade DVDs for sale. What he says are strange objects in the Phoenix skies.
I've seen a lot of UFOs. I've shot, like 100 hours of video of different strange objects in the sky.
All in hopes of being in the right place if another Phoenix Lights should appear.
So don't forget about tonight's special presentation, the Phoenix Lights X, with an all-new videotape from March 13th, 1997. Beverly Kidd hosts at 8:30.
Everybody, and welcome to the newsroom. Thanks for joining. Everybody, and welcome to the newsroom. Thanks for joining us. I'm Heather Moore. It is stunning news from an ex-governor. Fife Symington admitting not only that he saw the Phoenix Lights, but also saying it was not military flares. Frank Camacho has the exclusive news.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
Hundreds of people saw these lights in 1997, but not everyone spoke up, especially after this.
Don't get him too close to me, please.
The state's top official, poking fun.
Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
Boy, what a difference 10 years makes.
It appeared several times. I had seen the lights, and I saw them out in the western sky past the White Tank Mountains.
Former Governor Fife Symington now says he saw something that night, something more than these lights, which appeared over the valley around 10 o'clock on March 13th. He says he saw something that looked something like this.
It has never been identified to this date, and I suspect that unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft. It wouldn't surprise me.
Symington first told his story in a not yet released documentary, but kept it secret until recently.
Oh, what do we got?
He told filmmakers he never believed the military explanation of a flare drop way out west. We obtained this short clip from the documentary called Out of the Blue.
Flares. It didn't look like that. It was all too symmetrical. I mean, it clearly had a shape to it, and a big shape, and it was a constant shape. And you can't control flares that way. There's just no way they were flares.
Then, this week, CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 flew a crew into town to follow up. They shared the tape with us.
That it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft. It wouldn't surprise me.
From another world?
Yeah, and I believe that that's perfectly possible. I always have, yeah.
So you believe what you saw was something from outside of Earth?
Yes, something beyond my ability to probably understand, and it was so technologically advanced that it was, I think I explained to you that it was a thrilling feeling to see it.
And And you can see the rest of the story with Anderson Cooper tonight on CNN, and we'll have lots more right here on the newsroom. That's tomorrow.
In your gut, you could just tell. In your gut, you could just tell it was otherworldly.
On CNN last night, our former governor admits he believes in UFOs. The story was just 3 minutes long, but we have the tape of the entire interview, and there are some things they left out. Now, from the cutting room floor.
Not too sure I knew what I was seeing. It was a huge object and nothing like I'd ever seen before.
Fife Symington III talks with CNN reporter Gary Tuckman about the Phoenix Lights.
In March of 1997, tell me what you saw one night.
Well, one night I went out and I saw the lights that were creating the hysteria basically in the valley.
But the former governor didn't see these lights. He wasn't watching the skies that night. His sighting came later.
Don't get him too close to me, please. You know.
And when he held this news conference in June of 1997, he still hadn't seen the thing he talks about.
I could see why everybody got so excited about it. Bigger than anything I'd ever seen in the air, anyway. I mean, it was enormous.
All right, Governor, let's take a look at this. Tell me if this looks familiar, okay?
Mm-hmm. Switchboards were lighting up at the Capitol and the governor's office, and the DPS was on alert. It was really interesting. I looked at them through binoculars, and I saw the faint outlines of it would have been a really dark object that was sort of wedge-shaped, but the lights were really brilliant. And it was just fascinating.
Other witnesses describe a black object, something like this. But Tuckman wanted to know if Symington saw it, why didn't he admit it at the time? Or at the very least, apologize for making fun of those who did.
After you saw this,
yeah,
why didn't you go on TV and say, fellow Arizonans, I've seen a spacecraft maybe from another world?
Oh, well, you know, that's a fair question. I just didn't feel it was really my place to do that.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
Did you ever consider going public and saying, I saw something that I think might have come from another world?
Well, I think I remember telling my staff that. And
but what about Arizonans?
No, I never considered doing that.
And why, though?
I don't know. In retrospect, I probably should have. But, you know, after the press conference, when I dressed my chief of staff up as a space alien, I think they might have stepped back and say, whoa, what is this guy up to?
Symington says he believes in life on other planets and doesn't care what other people think of that. He also knows it is an uphill battle getting the public to believe it, too.
The only time I think people will really believe is if they land on the Capitol Mall. When the politicians believe it, then everybody will believe it.
But you're a politician?
All right, and you can see this story and more on our website. That's at azfamily.com.
Trying to get answers, to get to the truth. The Phoenix Lights case drew international attention. And now with the 10th anniversary upon us, new media are still looking for answers. It started local, but soon crews from all over the world were in Arizona to cover the sighting.
Unidentified flying objects.
6 amber orbs in a row, totally equidistant from each other.
It changed Len Kitai's life, a prominent Valley physician. This is video she took that night from her Paradise Valley home. But at the time, she remained anonymous.
You know, it took a lot of soul searching. It was 7 years, not only of intensive investigation, searching for a logical explanation for what I had witnessed and photographed.
Here, photographs from 2 years prior and from sightings she says continue to this day. Dr. Kitai finally revealed herself in a book, which then became a documentary.
We've won over a dozen International Film Festival awards. Not only is that very special for any film, but in this genre, it is unheard of.
Others recognize the potential too. Robert and Anthony Miles are Arizona filmmakers whose new movie, Fast Walkers, also covers the history of UFOs, including the Phoenix Lights.
And frankly, we didn't have anyone in there that really poo-pooed the idea. These were people who did have something to say.
Scientists, airline pilots, doctors, these type of people who in a normal situation, you would literally put your life in their hands.
Fast Walkers features credentialed experts, all saying the same thing.
Worldwide, there's actually an international UFO flap occurring around the world. There were literally tens of thousands of people that are seeing these objects, and the people in the United States aren't getting the news.
Cam 3, going to Cam 3.
The Cutting Edge is a TV show broadcast around the country. Jim Roger hosts from here in Tucson.
It's not taboo woo-woo stuff, you know. There really are scientific explanations out there.
And his guests say what people all over Arizona saw March 13th should not be ignored.
I'm not out there to shake somebody's world. I'm not trying to shake people up. I'm just trying to reach their heart if they'll watch the show with an open mind and use normal human reasoning powers. It wasn't anything natural. No natural phenomena that any researcher could really put their finger on it.
The show is streamed on the internet for a worldwide audience, an audience that's already so hungry, a web search of the Phoenix Lights brings up 46,000 hits.
The Phoenix Lights was the first mass sighting ever to be addressed on the internet with chat rooms. People could actually communicate with someone in Australia that saw something and someone in India that saw something similar.
With connections like that, the Phoenix Lights and other sightings may never be put to rest. In preparing for tonight's show, we spoke with a number of people who simply refused to talk to us for fear of losing their jobs, their friends, respect. The next two people you're about to meet had no such fear at all, a state legislator and an aircraft pilot.
Don, Rusty, I presume you're over at the meeting.
He's the director of Arizona Rock Products Association, a lobbying group for contractors, cement makers, miners, and more. But back in 1997, Rusty Bowers was a state senator, sitting on 4 legislative committees and sponsoring dozens of bills. He was also a witness.
I just parked the car and watched.
Hey, Sue!
It was a deep dusk, so it was after dark. And I thought to myself, hey, look, there's the Confederate Air Force. They're doing something over the valley. And I thought, no, they're amber. They don't have amber lights. And I thought that was unusual. And so I just pulled over and watched them. And they came towards me, kind of more towards me than any other direction, around the end of South Mountain, and then proceeded in a line going across the top of Phoenix, headed kind of towards Camelback Mountain, out that way. No, it wasn't flares.
I can't tell you what it was, but I can tell you what it wasn't.
Up in North Scottsdale, Trig Johnston and his son were awestruck. And for a former Northwest Airlines pilot who's flown around the world, that's unusual.
It was 10:20 at night. And as it got closer and closer, we kept thinking, well, what is this thing? And the answer is we don't know what it is. Now, we could see stars through this, but we could not see the top lights that we had been watching were blacked out by the structure, I guess what you could say. It continued on down Scottsdale Road, made a right turn at about Indian School, went directly over the Sky Harbor Airport.
He says he knows of other pilots who saw something that night, but they want to keep their jobs.
Airline management has enough to worry about without one of their pilots being involved in something as controversial as seeing a UFO. Now, anybody who sees it is going to get a lot of heat from those he shares a story with.
But this retired pilot has nothing to lose. And Bowers says no explanation sounds crazy to him.
And I thought, you know, if it was aliens, they couldn't scare me any more than working in the legislature. I mean, that wouldn't be, they're a lot more weird down here than they are up in that light.
We're almost there. The full story of the video that may put all the questions to rest or bring about a whole new set of questions. A flying triangle or V-shape. Learn where and when this was caught on tape as the Phoenix Lights X continues.
Hit it, fellas! On March 30th, get ready to meet the Robinsons. Dr. Krunkelhorn.
For a lot of people, our final story tonight will be the clincher. For others, another sighting that has yet to be explained. It all comes down to this tape, and the Phoenix Lights X has it first. Those who have studied it call it the intruder.
There were lots of witnesses to the Phoenix Lights that came forward and told their story.
let us use their name, and they became part of the database.
Jim Dilatoso got to know them all. His computer lab in 1997 became the unofficial clearinghouse for all the Phoenix Lights information.
More important are the people that came forward and didn't want us to use their name and didn't want us to expose the film or the video evidence that they had.
He says now, after 10 years, it's time for this videotape to be shown.
The V formation, the intruder.
There's 2 planes behind it. No, it's not. It's another one. It just doesn't have as many lights. It's another triangle.
Disregard the date stamp for a moment and look at the lights. It appears to be a V shape moving in the night sky over northern Arizona. The video comes from near the Grand Canyon. Dilatoso says an airline pilot and a stewardess on vacation caught what could be the most important video ever of what he says is a UFO or 2. The couple borrowed a friend's camera. They never bothered to set the date. It's actually 1997 and is thought to be March 13th.
There has been discussion about whether it happened an hour before or a day before or some time before. Regardless of the exact time, what it is incredibly important because it is a V formation of lights, just like the Phoenix Lights, just like described by witnesses, just like videotaped by some other witnesses, and was not at 10 o'clock at night on March 13th, but was a time earlier than that.
There's no guarantee this video shows the same thing so many people say they saw that night. Couldn't it just as likely be a commercial airplane way up high?
We made it our business to compare. Formation of airplanes, what do they look like? How do they fly? What noises do you hear, if any? What are the lights that are on airplanes flying in formation? A lot of study. In the end of all the analysis, this V formation of lights is not airplanes and is not flares. What is it? It's another unknown.
We'll leave you with that, with the hope that you've learned more about the Phoenix Lights of 1997. Because, as you know, there's always more to a story.
There is much more to this story than March 13th.
More than the 4 home videos that brought the Phoenix Lights to the world.
These objects track the precise navigational course and maintain an altitude. Flares don't do that.
More than military flares, which appear often west of Phoenix and Tucson.
And at dark night, and like we have out here in no city, those things light up very, very well, and you can see them for, I'd say, 100 miles.
More than the intruder video, which will provide answers for some and more questions for others. More can be found on our website, azfamily.com, including the story of one more not yet released video from that night.
I am still uncertain about why the video was given to me.
Thanks for watching our special presentation of the Phoenix Lights X. I'm Beverly Kidd. Good night.
I don't have an explanation, nor have sought one. If you find it, though, would you let us know?